justice in this. All I see is judicial theater. Now, are these charges a good thing? Well, they would be if I thought that they were actually serious and not just an election year stunt. You can look at who it's against and how this has been carried out and what the charges are. You can just see the scam. Before we go any farther, there are no charges against the animal who fired the shots that murdered Breonna Taylor. I'm talking about Miles Cosgrove, formerly of the Louisville Thug Patrol. He hasn't been charged under this federal indictment. That was deliberate. The animal who actually committed the murder hasn't been charged with anything. In fact, Merrick Garland decided to go ahead and say, well, they didn't know anything about this. This has to do with the actual warrant we're talking about. This is about the warrant, the falsely filed affidavit that was carried out under false pretenses. That's what he's like. They didn't know anything. And one of the other Louisville thugs who fired rounds into all of the other apartment units, that Mattingly guy, he hasn't been charged either by the feds. Mattingly is the creep thug who it's alleged that Kenneth Walker supposedly shot, but even if he did do it, he shot the guy in self-defense as Mattingly was carrying out his illegal home invasion and killing of Breonna Taylor. So Merrick Garland's not touching the thug who actually fired the shots that murdered Breonna Taylor, and he's also not doing anything about the chief collaborator in the murder. Two of the individuals who were most involved in the killing that night, and Merrick Garland's not doing anything about them. I hammer that point home so you can understand. Who is this actually dealing with? This is not justice for Breonna Taylor. Justice is to make sure the people who took her life, that all of them go to prison, and the Justice Department's made it very clear they got a hands-off policy for anyone who actually kills a black person. They can charge Cosgrove and Mattingly with murder, or at the very least, charge them with murder because they committed the killing of Breonna Taylor while they were violating her constitutional rights. The decision by the Justice Department not to charge either one, it's not being done because they can't. This is just like what Daniel Cameron did. This is because it's a political operation to cover for them. The overarching principle of protecting the enforcement of white supremacy is what this is all about. And notice that the white media is only too happy to have Mushmouth Crump on TV. He and the other shysters in his entourage, why, they're all teeth, all smiling. Keep in mind, these clowns are all angling to get into politics. Sleaze Merritt took his shot in Texas and failed. And don't think Mushmouth Crump doesn't also wish to become a congressman or a dog catcher or whatever office that he daydreams about getting one day. These bootlick barristers are well aware of the political dimension here. They're playing it to the hilt. That's why they're acting like this is some sort of huge victory. Like, oh, we won, what a great thing. They're not raising hell that the trigger man who shot Breonna Taylor to death hasn't been charged. And they're not making any demands either. Crump isn't saying that justice hasn't been served and won't be served until those two remaining animals are charged and convicted. The entire point of this political exercise is optics. That's it. They want to contain the scope and the punishment here. They want to limit this. Of course, the DOJ is walking the tightrope. The family of Ahmaud Arbery prevented Biden's DOJ from being able to cover up the hate crimes charges against his killers earlier this year. Biden's DOJ desperately wanted to bury the prosecution of Ahmaud Arbery's murders before it got to that point. But Ahmaud Arbery's family wouldn't let that happen. Biden's DOJ was forced to have to carry out the prosecution against their will and over their own objections. They should have been the main ones leading the charge to have the killers put away and make sure those hate crimes charges stuck. But they were the main ones saying, we don't want to let it get that far. See, what happened was Biden's DOJ realized that black people could exercise power over the white folks in the DOJ. This time, though, they don't intend to let that happen. As Merrick Garland said,
the officers who ultimately carried out the search at this Taylor's department were not involved in the drafting of the warrant and were unaware of the false and misleading statements they contained.
Well, first of all, they didn't carry out a search at Breonna Taylor's apartment. They carried out a murder there. And secondly, they are just as guilty as the ones who actually wrote it up because they made the decision that they were going to go barging in to violate their own department's procedures and go smashing in the door without announcing themselves, though they claimed we had a no-knock warrant, but we announced ourselves. This is a straw man indictment that's being put on. It's meant to get some headlines, but it's not meant to actually punish anybody. And then afterwards, you'll have Biden's DOJ claiming, well, these were paperwork offenses they committed. We're talking about violating constitutional rights. We weren't here to actually punish the killing of Breonna Taylor. This was just a matter of her constitutional rights. Now, what constitutional right can be higher than the right to live? Keep in mind, this is the same Merrick Garland who just 7 months ago was bending over backwards to give a sweetheart plea deal to the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery. And that murder was caught on video. It was a slam dunk conviction. But Merrick Garland, the Biden DOJ, they didn't want a conviction. They wanted a plea deal. One that could make it where that whole hate crimes thing wouldn't actually attach. Because they don't want that to become habit forming. They don't want people to expect that to happen. What they want is for people to expect a plea deal that results in no real punishment. And they pulled a similar scam with Derek Chauvin and the collaborators in the murder of George Floyd. Now, the murder of Breonna Taylor was not some paperwork error. It was an intentional and deliberate act of murder. And everyone involved in it is guilty. From the gunman to the DA to the judge who signed the fraudulent warrant to the state attorney general. Make no mistake here. To not charge the actual gunman in this case is Biden's administration carefully catering to the police. They're making it clear that, hey, this is just for show. Don't take this seriously. Killing a black person still isn't a crime, and we won't allow it to be. And one more thing, the white media's been lying through its crooked teeth that Kenneth Walker shot the police and it certainly wasn't friendly fire. That's one of the lies by omission that they've been putting out there. The truth is, Kentucky State Police have never been able to conclusively deny that the Louisville thugs shot one another during their illegal and murderous entry into Breonna Taylor's residence. They've never actually been able to establish that, and they've never actually said, nope, there's no way in hell that these guys shot each other. All they said was, well, we support what the police said, with no evidence. The white media actually expects us to believe that a gang of violent thugs who lied to get a phony affidavit for an illegal search, who lied to a judge, lied to their department, demanded a no-knock warrant, and then turned around and claimed, well, we knocked anyway, even though all the neighbors say they never did. Those thugs who fired wild shots in all directions into adjacent apartments apparently were careful not to shoot one another. Yeah, because these guys are just so circumspect, don't you know? These guys are just so careful, they would never be that reckless. This is the kind of fairy tale that you have to believe if you're going to go along with the white media narrative. All they can say is that a shot was fired from Kenneth Walker's gun, but to this day, nobody's been able to prove that the bullet he fired hit that thug that night. It is far more plausible, and it just makes common sense that these violent white supremacist thugs shot each other. They damn sure weren't the picture of discipline, not that night or any other night. Bullets from their guns were flying everywhere. Not bullets from Kenneth Walker's gun. He only fired one shot. They were bunched up together, trying to barge their way in, tripping over each other. Of course they shot one another. There's no cure for crooked and no cure for stupid. And for the idiots who might try to claim, well, it's complicated, man. They can't just put murder charges on someone just because they was there. Remember, after the murder of Breonna Taylor, that lying racist DA Wine, he decided to try to actually charge Kenneth Walker with the murder of Breonna Taylor. Remember that? He tried to charge Kenneth Walker with the murder of the woman who the police had killed. And they were forced to have to drop the case because Judge Olu Stevens made it clear there wasn't going to be any railroading of Kenneth Walker in his courtroom. That DA was trying to put the blame on someone else. He had no problem. Nobody was saying, well, you can't charge Kenneth Walker. It's not like he shot Breonna Taylor. He was trying to pretend, well, he was there and it's his fault. We're saying that he's responsible. He's responsible for it. So the actual killers, the actual gunmen aren't responsible for killing Breonna Taylor. That's impossible to prove. Wow, there ain't no leak. Ain't prove legally now. But a man who didn't shoot her, the DA had no problem saying we're going to charge him. Come on. Walker's own attorney put out a report saying that the police shot each other. The state couldn't refute it because they can't establish who actually shot that white supremacist intruder. Yet the white media says it must have been Kenneth Walker because surely the police would never have shot each other. That's not logical thinking, and it's not reality either. So anytime someone says Kenneth Walker shot the police, you make sure to demand that they point to where the state established that. Even the lying white media can't do that. All they say is, well, the Kentucky State Police, they say that they support what the LNP claimed. Now, there is a world of difference between support and prove. They didn't say they proved what the Louisville Police Department said. They say we support what they say. Well, isn't the entire point of the Kentucky State Police that they're supposed to actually determine things on their own? Why isn't the Kentucky State Police saying we have proven that Kenneth Walker did it? Instead, they just say, well, we're going to support what these guys have said. That's not their job. Their job is not just to nod their heads with what a third party says. Their job is to establish it on their own. But this is what the white media is doing. This is a hell of a stretch. But these are the lengths that they've had to go to in order to try to prop up some of the lies that they've been telling, because a lot of those lies have already died a horrible, grisly death and fallen already. But for the few remaining lies that they've been trying to use, these are the lengths they've had to go to. No evidence, no proof, just take our word because we're white and we said so. We already know that the crooked DA down there offered Jamarcus Glover a plea deal with no jail time if he would just lie and say that Breonna Taylor was trafficking drugs. Remember that? Jamarcus Glover, the man who the police claimed that they raided Breonna Taylor's apartment to find. Jamarcus Glover himself refused to lie, and he even took a screenshot of that fraudulent plea deal that the DA offered, and he posted it on social media so the world could see it. And the slimy DA was later forced to claim, well, that was just a draft agreement. It was a draft agreement, you see. He began white-splaining like crazy, saying that, well, these were just pre-indictment negotiations. I mean, it was clearly not finalized. Does anyone believe that? You're bringing somebody a draft, pre-indictment negotiations that you're deciding to write down? No, pre-indictment negotiations are done between the defendant's attorney and the DA, and then they come back later with what they've agreed on. The criminal DA also said in one breath that his office doesn't indict people posthumously. That was his only defense, which of course is a lie, because in the very next breath he said that out of respect, he directed that Breonna Taylor's name be removed from the plea deal paperwork. Both of those things cannot be true. You cannot in one breath have a piece of paper that says Breonna Taylor was trafficking drugs if we can get her former boyfriend to say so, and then in the next breath say, why, we don't indict people posthumously. Well, what the hell else is it when you're trying to manufacture a phony legal document saying that Breonna Taylor was involved in drug trafficking when you know that she wasn't, and you're doing this after she's dead precisely because you're trying to justify her death? Now, what that proves is that the DA personally knew that Breonna Taylor's name was on that plea deal. He didn't even attempt to claim that he didn't know, unlike Kamala Harris. You know how every time she was DA of San Francisco or Attorney General of California, all the dirty dealings her various offices did, she always claimed she didn't know anything about them. Well, the DA in this case couldn't claim he didn't know. So that DA knew that Breonna Taylor's name was on the paperwork that he had written up. And it was only after Mr. Glover made this dirty would-be deal public that the DA then began lying and claiming that, oh, I said to have her name removed. Yeah, because it was obvious Mr. Glover wasn't going to go along with the cover-up. Oh, that DA, he just knew that Jamarcus Glover would repeat their lies. I mean, after all, they had a case on him, or so they claimed. They felt they had leverage on this black man. Why, we got leverage on, we got a case over his head. This is going to be easy. He'll roll right over. Only Mr. Glover didn't blink. Worse than that, he refused to lie about Breonna Taylor. And in the end, it was that lying criminal in the DA's office who blinked. He was the one who had to tap out, because they don't want anyone seeing the lengths that they all went to cover up a murder. This is a murder that the local government committed. The vicious murder of Breonna Taylor was not merely a heinous crime committed by some racist hillbillies in Kentucky. It was an execution by the state. And you can tell because of all of the state officials who got involved. Everyone from the judge who signed off on it, to the DA, to the state attorney general. Now, shortly after the DA's half-baked attempt to get Jamarcus Glover to commit perjury failed, the DA then agreed overnight to give Mr. Glover probation on all charges, and he was quick to want to drop the prosecution of Jamarcus Glover altogether. Look, I'll get rid of all the charges. I'm dropping everything. Probation for what few charges are there, and everything else just going to be dismissed. Well, that is if Mr. Glover agrees to leave the state of Kentucky. See, that was what the terms of the plea deal ultimately were. The plea deal that didn't have Breonna Taylor's name in it. So Jamarcus Glover he knew that he could get exactly what he wanted without having to lie about Breonna Taylor. It was the DA who had to finally give up the ghost. But isn't that interesting? The DA's plea deal requires that Mr. Glover leave the state of Kentucky. Now, why would the DA not want him in the state of Kentucky? After all, this man's supposed to be the biggest drug dealer in the entire state. Why would the DA not want him within arm's reach? Why would he require you must leave the state? You think he's sitting there, no, I want you to stay around so we can put another case on you. No, they wanted him gone. Why? Because when lies like this fail, when attempts like this fail by crooked DAs, they fail completely. They don't want Jamarcus Glover to be in Louisville or even the state of Kentucky, because he could cause problems for the local lying DA and for Daniel Cameron and the rest of the criminals in Kentucky. I want you to think about what that DA tried to do here, the stunt he tried to pull. I want you to think about it because clearly Biden's DOJ and that creep Merrick Garland, they're not thinking about this at all. You see how wide this conspiracy to cover up the murder of Breonna Taylor is. Jamarcus Glover, who the police and the DA told everyone is the biggest dope dealer in the South. Jamarcus Glover, who apparently, to hear the white DA and the white cops tell it, he's just running loads in and out of Louisville nonstop. Jamarcus Glover, who, to hear them tell it, he's the entire reason that they murdered Breonna Taylor because he's such a dangerous drug dealer. We have to get a no-knock warrant because Jamarcus Glover is just so dangerous. Well, they arrested Mr. Glover without incident, by the way. And this man, who is supposed to be the cause of all this tragedy, certainly not the police. This man who has been dealing all these drugs and breaking all these laws, this man who they've been chasing for so long and gone to such lengths to apprehend, the DA drops the entire set of charges against him at the drop of a hat. If he would just sign a piece of paper saying that Breonna Taylor had something to do with drug dealing. Man, could you imagine if El Chapo could get himself a deal like that? Get the feds to drop all charges against him? If he would just say that some innocent third party who the cops had killed was involved. Or not even say that she was the mastermind, just say she was involved and that why all the charges go away, because that means they're more interested in dirtying her up than they are in putting him away. Everyone knows what this is about. Every time that a black person is killed by the thugs in blue, the white media narrative is, well, let's find some dirt on them. Let's show that they basically somehow deserve it. Sure. They were unarmed and they were innocently killed that night. But we got to show, well, this person was a bad person. They were immoral. They deserved it on some level. Well, they couldn't do that to Breonna Taylor. So they were trying to find a third party who would. So that the racist in the white media and the society themselves could say, well, you tried to say she was innocent, and well, she was guilty of something. Sure, she probably didn't deserve to die that night, but she was guilty of something. If Jamarcus Glover was who and what the white police and DAs claimed that he was, then it should have been inconceivable to offer a big-time dope dealer like that any sort of plea deal, because they weren't eager to offer Kenneth Walker any sort of plea deals. That's because they thought that they were going to be able to easily railroad him into prison and say, well, it doesn't matter who actually murdered Breonna Taylor. We're saying that it's Kenneth Walker's fault. So you see, it doesn't matter if it was Kenneth Walker or Jamarcus Glover. They were just trying to find a black person who they could pin the killing on. And when all else failed, they said, well, let's just blame Breonna Taylor for her own murder. Now, Breonna Taylor's murder doesn't change whatever drug dealing accusations or trafficking accusations or whatever they claim to have on Jamarcus Glover. These are two separate issues. The police were after Mr. Glover way before they arrived to kill Breonna Taylor. And whatever evidence they claim to have on Jamarcus Glover, that doesn't become irrelevant just because they murdered an unarmed innocent woman in her own home. So if the Louisville Thug Patrol really did have this mountain of evidence on the alleged biggest dope dealer in the South, why didn't the police simply proceed to trial then? Why dump the biggest drug dealing prosecution in U.S. history to hear them tell it? Simply because you need to smear Breonna Taylor. How can smearing an innocent dead woman possibly be more important than putting away the biggest dope dealer in the country, as they try to portray him? Now, of course, I don't think I need to belabor the point that there were no drugs, no drug paraphernalia, or even one thin dime of drug money found at Breonna Taylor's residence. They found nothing there. So if Breonna Taylor was doing all of this dope dealing and allowing her place to be used as a stash house for all this contraband, as the police and the DA claimed, then where were the drugs? Where was the paraphernalia? Where was the money? Where was anything? No, this was about they didn't have a case. They knew they didn't. They stepped in it big time. But if they can just get somebody, if they can just pressure someone into saying, well, she was involved. That's what it's about. Justifying her murder after the fact. Well, she was involved. That right there tells you everything you need to know about how strong a case they thought they had against Jamarcus Glover. These are the kind of illegal fishing expeditions that local, state, and federal law enforcement do against Black people all the time. Manufacturing a smear of Breonna Taylor, trying to incentivize someone to lie about her, that was more important to them than putting away the allegedly biggest drug dealer in U.S. history. Because this was about protecting the enforcement of white supremacy. And that's what Merrick Garland is doing right now. All these white supremacists at all levels desperately trying to manufacture a justification for Breonna Taylor's murder after the fact. That's called suborning perjury. So we're not going to let the white media sit here and pretend as if Merrick Garland has some sort of come to Jesus moment. As if, oh, these guys, they found some heretofore unseen evidence. No, they didn't. This stuff has been out there for at least the last 2 years. But the only ones talking about it have been the new voices of Black media. It ain't been the Biden White House talking about it. The Democratic Party ain't been talking about it. And your Black feminists ain't been talking about it. This is what makes chumps like Tyrannosaurus Burke so damnable. She had the nerve to ask, why is it my job to go after white men? And then people are shocked when Tyrannosaurus Burke says almost nothing about the murder of Breonna Taylor. Listen up, stupid. When Burke asked why it's her job to go after white men, when she rebuffed that idea, she meant why should she be critical of a white man under any circumstances? And she's not alone. For the last few years, the bootlick bedwitch contingent have been obsessing over R. Kelly, who, let's be honest, we've all known he had one foot inside a prison cell for years. Demonizing R. Kelly had nothing to do with putting him in prison and everything to do with the racial distraction campaign and America's favorite pastime, hating Black people in general and Black men in specific. So while KRS-Two and the rest of the ski-wees have been kissing the white media's behinds and doing white power's bidding and pretending to obsess over big bad Black men, these same Black feminists said pretty much nothing about Breonna Taylor. But these same chumps will suddenly remember Breonna Taylor now, won't they? And they're going to claim why they were with us all along. These people have been quiet for the last 2+ years. Oh, yeah, they were behind us the whole time. Yeah, way behind us. So far behind us, we couldn't even see or hear them. So 2 years ago, while these phony feminists who are desperately looking for a white media gig were busy pretending to obsess over R. Kelly and Bill Cosby, you had the new voices of Black media like myself who were getting on the Washington Post butts about their fake coverage and cover-up of the Breonna Taylor murder. I personally went after the writers on Twitter to call them out. Why? Because they're the agenda-setting media. It's important to get them to cover that the warrant was based on deliberate lies. And they didn't want to do it. But I stayed on them until they did. And the enemy had no answer for that. See, the main thing that Merrick Garland's talking about is the warrant. You didn't need to wait for him to say anything. We were talking about this years ago. The job of the white media is not to inform. In fact, their job is the opposite. It's to cover up, to obfuscate. It's to saturate the society in whatever viewpoint is expedient to white power. Their job is to put up a wall of white noise and to drown out the Black truth. See, the poor half-wits who follow the white media, they're shocked at the claims of phony affidavits and perjury and false reports. To them, this is brand new. They're like, well, when did this come from? How come we didn't hear about it? And the rest of the white media, the CNNs and the MSNBCs and all the rest of them, they're acting shocked too. They did absolutely no headlines talking about the phony warrants. You had the Black media on them. They were forced to have to put it into the story because we got on their butts about it. We were like, well, we're not going to make headlines out of that because headlines means we have to actually follow up on it. We're not doing that. We're just going to pretend as if we don't really know what happened. Why? There's some unsubstantiated claims one way and there's unsubstantiated refutations the other way. And well, I mean, who can say who's right here? But one thing's for sure, the police are definitely not lying. They're the heroes in blue and they risk their lives every day. And they definitely wouldn't have gunned that nigger down in cold blood. So she must have done something. We can't question the police. The only reason that the Washington Post even mentioned the fraudulent warrant in passing was because I personally got on the behinds of the writers who were trying to cover up the murder of Breonna Taylor, and I told them their lies and omissions, and I got on them and stayed on their behinds about it. Then they did a pathetic, feeble CYA piece. This way they would be able to falsely claim that, well, we did report on it. You can't say we didn't mention it now. No, there's a world of difference between reporting on something and covering something. To do a one and done mention of something that you put in the middle of an article, that's not even reporting it. That's merely mentioning it. Now, what they've done in regards to the police, where they sit there and slavishly repeat whatever the police tell them, that's reporting, or rather repeating. But you cannot lie and say that you've covered something unless you're actually talking about it day after day. You're going in depth with your investigation. You're making sure that you look at this from every angle and that you're also digging to get the information for yourself. You're not just repeating whatever the police tell you to say, which is what the white media has done on this from the very beginning. The white media did not report on the fraudulent warrants. They just mentioned it at 100 miles per hour and kept going. Not once did they make a headline out of it. Now, that alone might, small m, count as reporting, but it dang sure doesn't count as coverage. It's headlines saying that the warrant that was used to murder Breonna Taylor was based on intentional, deliberate lies. That would be coverage if you do it day after day, because you have to. But the white media's job is to justify the murders of black people. As the mouthpiece of white power, they're not going to delegitimize the enforcement of white supremacy. They work hand in hand with thugs in blue. So as the cheerleaders for white supremacist thugs in the police, the white media isn't going to willingly point out their racism and corruption. Now keep in mind, Breonna Taylor's murder happened during 2020, during the national uprisings. You had a situation as egregious as the murder of George Floyd, worse in that this was planned out, a paper trail showing that the police lied repeatedly, and yet the white media had an across-the-board hands-off policy regarding this story. And so did your black feminists. They were desperate to change the headline. And that's where your black feminists come in. They give cover to the white media by screaming and yelling about some black man. And while everyone's busy asking whether R. Kelly had a harem or not, the murderers of Breonna Taylor are allowed to stay on the loose. Isn't it interesting how all these black feminists are also looking to get white media jobs too? All the Me Too, Time's Up, Black Girl Magic, Black Woman is the Mule of the World, the culture is Black women types. They're also all trying to get on a white cable station, get themselves a show on a white radio station, or get themselves a book deal with a white publisher, or get themselves some sort of regular columnist gig with a white publication. They want to be part of the white media ecosystem, but they understand what the white media's rules are. Let me tell you something. When these black feminists do white power's bidding and take the focus off the thugs in blue and off of white supremacists in power who are abusing their positions like Harvey Weinstein or Joe Biden, that's not some victimless crime. When the Tarana Burks do their deflections, black women die. Black women get murdered when the Tarana Burks do their stupid deflections. When the Tiffany Cross-Eyes and the Joke Reeds decide to follow red herrings like Bill Cosby and ignore the killers of black women, they make it where the killers of black women get to walk and look for their next victims. It's not just part of the news cycle, okay? What the black media's been doing, this is what protecting black women looks like. This is what sticking up for black women looks like. Playing along with the white media narrative is not protecting black women. It's endangering them. It protects the murderers of black women from being punished, and it encourages the next thug with a badge or without one to target black women because they know that there's a ready pool of black feminists who are going to help the white media change the headline and talk about black men instead. Oprah Winfrey didn't say one piddling word about Breonna Taylor and didn't want to even get involved until after the black media started putting up billboards in Louisville. Once the black media did that and staked its issue, then Oprah Winfrey waddled her behind out on stage. She finally took some time away from hanging out with her white media mogul buddies on their yachts to try to on their behalf and at their behest. They told her to get out there. We need a front Negro, Oprah. You know what time it is. The black grassroots had taken the initiative on the Breonna Taylor murder, and we were telling people the facts and putting pressure on the white media and the police. And now the white media desperately needed to try to get out in front of the story and divert attention away from punishing the murderers. So they bring in America's favorite mammy, and she says she'll do a lot of billboards about Breonna Taylor, something the heifer's never done before. But white power told her to do it, and afterwards she talks about how much she cares about black women. And nobody's sticking up for black women. Yeah, Oprah, you're not sticking up for black women. Tarana Burke's not sticking up for black women. Tiffany Cross ain't sticking up for black women. Now, you have had out here in the black grassroots, where black opinion actually lives, where the black consensus actually resides. You've had black men and women who have been out here making sure that Breonna Taylor's name isn't forgotten, that the murder of Breonna Taylor isn't allowed to fade away into memory. But, and it needs to be said, there have been black men in particular in this space who have been leading the charge in this regard. From Kenneth Walker to Jamarcus Glover to the new voices of black media, not just online, but when it comes to putting pressure on the white media and taking over the media narrative offline. All of these so-called influential black feminists who have all these white media and political pals and who are so media savvy to hear them tell it, and yet they did nothing. They didn't put their organizations or pressure their white media or political pals to call out the illegal warrants and every other illegal aspect of this murder. These are the black feminists who Tiffany Cross-Eyes calls influential. But why did they not use their influence? These black feminists are inventions of the white media, that's why. Without the white media to give them a TV show or to give them a column in some white publication or to give them some airtime on a white radio station, these black feminists wouldn't exist. They don't have any influence. The white media they suck up to does. The white media can give them a platform, however ragged, but the white media cannot give them influence. MSNBC heaping praise on a bunch of irrelevant nobodies doesn't change the fact that they're irrelevant nobodies. And the reason that I hammer these black feminists on this is they're the ones who are going to be getting in front of the white media's cameras and talking about how this is such a big move and Joe Biden's doing big things and, oh, we've been waiting for this. This is what we asked for, no matter what the outcome is. And you know what the outcome is going to be. They already showed you what they intend to do with Ahmaud Arbery and with Derek Chauvin. That's exactly what they intend to do. They're going to bury with a sweetheart plea deal. And those same black feminists will be talking about how, well, this was just, at least something was done. You see, it's very easy to sit around a table and pretend to be a big shot. It's very hard to bite the white media hand that feeds you and to call out the refusal of the Biden DOJ to indict Cosgrove and Mattingly. It's very easy to excoriate sanctioned targets like Cosby and R. Kelly, but it's very difficult to disagree or even call out your white media paymasters or your white political patrons when you depend on them for every crumb of your daily bread. It's very difficult to tell the Democrats that they have to run on a platform of punishing the police and to run candidates who will unseat a Daniel Cameron so they can go after the cops. It's very difficult to do because you recognize full well that the Democrats are every bit as anti-black as the Daniel Camerons and the Louisville police and all the rest of them. So the Tiffany Cross-Eyes and the Joke Reeds and Simone Sanders, they already understand how far they better not go. They understand, well, there's certain folks you can call out and others that you better not. So they'll be campaigning for Democrats in the fall, but they won't say a peep for black women if it means demanding that the white Democratic Party structure enforces the law. These black feminists know what side their bread's buttered on. Spouting empty slogans about say her name, that's cheap. But to say the names of Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Merrick Garland and demand they enforce the law or else, that's difficult to do, which is why the bootlicks don't do it, and only the black media does. The black grassroots have been the ones out here riding for Breonna Taylor, keeping her name in people's ears, reminding you that her killers were still on the loose. Biden and Kamala damn sure weren't saying anything about Breonna Taylor, and neither were any of the Negro bootlicks. None of these phony feminists out here. So all of you black feminists who are suddenly coming out of your comas long enough to cheer this latest development, you can shut the hell up. You're the reason that it took this long to get what little has been done. And you'll be cheering it no matter what the outcome is. Either you'll be claiming, well, somebody got some minor jail time, or at least they got a slap on the wrist, and that's something. Or if nothing happens, you'll be going, oh, how sad it is. And this is why we need more Democrats in office. You can crawl back into whatever hole you've been hiding in. Go back to asking when Surviving R. Kelly Part 3 is going to come out, or when Surviving Bill Cosby going to drop, or whatever other black man you want to go after. You've already declared that you have a hands-off policy when it comes to black women who have been assaulted or even murdered by some white supremacist thug. So your phony moralizing doesn't fool anyone. Now, as for what comes next, well, if the Biden DOJ's track record is anything to judge by, we can just look at what's happened in the last 6 months for that one. I'm afraid no one with any honesty, integrity, or decency should be expecting that much. Biden's DOJ is already telegraphing to everyone exactly what the plan here is. They're not touching the actual murderers of Breonna Taylor, and this is all about paperwork that they're actually complaining about, not about loss of life. That's delivered. That's the message that's being sent. Let's be honest here. Kristen Clark is the one handling this case. She's already shown both with Ahmaud Arbery's murderers and with Derek Chauvin and his murderous pals just how much of a quickie plea deal she would like to give so she can falsely claim victory. She's already shown exactly where her playbook is. Protecting the murderers, not putting them in prison. The family of Ahmaud Arbery had to publicly call out Kristen Clark and shame her publicly, and then had to go to the judge and beg for a trial that everybody knew was a slam dunk case, because Kristen Clark is part of the problem. That's why Joe Biden has her where she is. The fact that this immigrant turncoat is handling this doesn't fill me with confidence, to say the least. Also, I'm sure that a lot of you, it has not slipped your notice that this is all going down during an election year. I guess they decided not to pretend that they would finally arrest Emmett Till's killer again. You know how for the last 10 years or so, in fact longer than that, you can go all the way back to the W administration. Seems every few years, whenever somebody's trying to find a way to pander to some black votes, they'll say, hey, we're reopening the Emmett Till murder case again. Then as soon as the election's over, oh, we're closing it again. Well, the problem happens to be they actually found the warrant against that heifer who made the false accusation against Emmett Till. So now they're like, oh, we better not mention Emmett Till again, because this time we actually have to do something. So they're like, let's move on to something else. So the little racist game of using Emmett Till's mutilated corpse to try to get some black credibility, that game's run out. So now they're trying to play this new one. Biden's not saying anything about this case, nor will he say anything about the Police Accountability Commission that he promised to impanel during his 2020 campaign, or about how he personally demanded hundreds of millions of dollars for the thugs in blue, like the Louisville PD, but did not demand one iota of oversight, or how in the middle of the so-called abortion debate at the Supreme Court, Biden sent his own inspector general to the Supreme Court to tell those radical right-wingers we need to get rid of the Miranda warnings. Police don't need to be held accountable for not informing people of their rights. So the same Biden who had been kissing the police's behinds for years, if not decades, and declaring that he doesn't want to defund the police, he wants to refund them. He also wants to do something about this case that his administration has been ignoring for the last 2 years. Is there anyone who's actually dumb enough to believe that? And speaking of changes, why is there not a word about Daniel Cameron in all this? He illegally refused to prosecute the killers. He was proven to have lied to the grand jury and lied to the public, and he claimed that he didn't influence the grand jury's decision not to indict. He lied repeatedly and claimed that the fraudulent illegal warrant was valid. That was his word that he used. He claimed it was valid. He actually said that, valid. This after his office had already looked at it and saw that the warrant was a lie. So you take Cameron's lies, combined with the grand jury's testimony that Cameron's office told them not to indict, instructed them, don't indict, and you have a slew of crimes. Any action that doesn't also prosecute Daniel Cameron is illegitimate. Putting a few clearly guilty, dirty cops on trial, that's not nearly enough. Even the Louisville PD said that these guys were guilty and recommended charges. So you're not impressing me with that one. They lied from the very beginning to the end of this tragedy that they carried out. So only going after the thugs in blue, that's just the beginning. Start going after the crooked DA and the prosecutors and judges, and then you can come to me and say you're finally doing something. Anything short of that is just glorified lip service, and I don't go for lip service. Because a crooked judge signed off on that affidavit without ever having vetted it. And when the judge did find out that the affidavit was based on lies, she didn't haul those thugs in blue before her court on perjury charges, which is what she's supposed to do. Instead, she did nothing. because she agreed with this murder, and also because this piece of trash judge knows that to question the affidavit that she signed off on, that would invite people to ask what other clearly fraudulent warrants that she signed off on in the past. So there's a lot of people who want to limit how far this action gets taken regarding Breonna Taylor's murder. The police, the prosecutors, and judges in Louisville, they're all scared that they'll go to prison, but Biden's DOJ is terrified that if they hold all the criminals and accomplices accountable, well, that would make it where other criminal judges and DAs would be terrified to uphold white supremacy. If you punish anti-black violence, then you remove the ability of white supremacy to enforce its rule. So it's good that at least some of the scumbags are at least getting charged and will conceivably, possibly be hauled into court. But family, we've seen this before from the same cast of characters in Biden's DOJ. The family of Breonna Taylor, and that includes Kenneth Walker, they're going to have to be on Biden's butt to make sure that Kristen Clark doesn't do what she's always done, which is to minimize the charges and immediately offer the murderers the lightest sentence that she can, all the while lying through her crooked teeth that this is justice. They're going to have to be on the butts of Biden's DOJ to make sure that the actual trigger men are charged as well, and to make sure that the DAs and judges and prosecutors who try to cover up the crime are also held accountable. We already understand that this was not the result of years of hard work. They didn't do any work on this one. This is a PR stunt slapped together over a weekend because Biden and the DNC see their poll numbers plummeting and they have to get some sort of momentum going somewhere. But given the track record of Biden's DOJ, just from what we've seen from them this year alone, with how they deliberately fought against Ahmaud Arbery's family to deny them justice, and then how they worked behind the scene to give George Floyd's murderers a slap on the wrist, anyone expecting this DOJ to go to the mat better get their feet back in reality. We don't need these murderers to simply be convicted of something. They have to get adequate punishment for the crimes that they committed. They have to go to prison for life, all of them. Daniel Cameron must also do prison time, as must the judge who signed off on the affidavit and did nothing about it, and the DA who first was trying to pin the murder onto an innocent man, Kenneth Walker, and then later tried to suborn perjury so that he could smear the deceased. Don't let the crooked smiles of the mushmouth crumps fool you. Don't let the white media's hype headlines deceive you. The white media is very good for putting out some phony headlines with a false celebratory air to it, because they know that a lot of folks are simple-minded and will get carried away very quickly. They do that deliberately so you feel good about something, though you're not sure what you're feeling good about. Ask who is actually being punished, and look at who is supposed to be doing the punishing. Biden's DOJ has made it clear they've learned from the L they took in the case of Ahmaud Arbery. Make no mistake, as far as Biden's DOJ is concerned, Ahmaud Arbery's family forced them to do something that wasn't supposed to happen. The killers were not supposed to actually get tagged with hate crimes. The Justice Department was supposed to actually have to go all the way with it. They wanted to stop it to uphold the idea that, well, certain defendants, if you've got genetic immunity from law, you get treated differently. Instead, it's a matter of, nah, that's not going to be going down this time. So as far as Biden's DOJ was concerned, they got railroaded. They got ramrodded by Ahmaud Arbery's family. Last time they made the mistake of charging the murderers, which made it where the family could demand the murderers be punished. Well, this time, they won't charge the gunman who murdered Breonna Taylor. This way, they think, no one's going to be able to pressure them to actually punish the killers this time. That's Merrick Garland, Kristen Clark, and Joe Biden's game plan this time. We're not going to have black people pressuring us to do anything. And that's how you have the white media putting out these headlines saying, well, black people see these charges as finally being justice for Breonna Taylor. That's the white media working hand in hand with the white government to push the narrative that's meant to preempt the predictable black discontent and outrage that's going to come to the surface when people look and say, wait a minute, they haven't actually done anything. They're not touching the killers of Breonna Taylor, and they're not touching all the corrupt government officials in Kentucky who tried to cover up her murder afterwards and tried to smear her after the fact. This is white power trying to get out in front of the issue. They saw what happened with Ahmaud Arbery, and they're determined that's not going to happen again. Oh, we're going to tell you that you guys are fine with this no matter what you niggers think. See, justice isn't what black people think it is. Justice is what white power tells you it is. And then these self-same liars and criminals They'll expect Black people, Black women in particular, to vote for them in November. And why not? Because after all, they've done so much to protect Black women. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Anthony Cooper, Burkett Cochrane, Sabrina, Rahman Muhammad, and Tyrone Leak. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.